All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today, it's Saturday, September 18th, 2021. This is your daily tropical update. Well, we didn't talk last night, but not much else is really going on. We did have the formation of Tropical Storm Odette off the coast of New England. The system is moving away and quickly losing its tropical characteristics as it becomes an extra tropical storm. We also have Invest 95L, now very close to tropical depression status after struggling for its trip across the Atlantic for the most part. All week we have been expecting this to develop, and it's just now to the point where it might be doing so, but it's also about to run into some strong upper level winds. And behind that, we have Invest 97L. It's actually getting ahead of the schedule, quickly developing, and we could have one or two name storms here this afternoon to talk about in addition to Odette. So let's go ahead and talk about these three in order, and then we'll see how they are going to play out for the basin. So, National Hurricane Center's morning map, waiting on the 2 p.m. update. May not get it for a little while longer, but I want to go ahead and get this out. Odette here off the coast, and then our other two players. We'll start with Odette, and looking at the satellite presentation of this one. Decently impressive looking storm. But it is becoming extra tropical pretty quick. It's always cool to see these big, large, lows off the coast of the Atlantic Basin, especially this time of year when these fronts kind of begin to wrap up in them. They always kind of look cool. But we can see the convection displaced well away from the center of circulation, which is back here, and this is all mostly low cloud junk. So it looks kind of cool. Odette is definitely not long for this world as a tropical cyclone, also over much colder water. The Gulf Shelf waters essentially end right about here, so Odette definitely on that colder side, and water temperature is only going to get colder over the next few days. The jet stream's also beginning to pick this storm up, and it will for a period of time. It will deepen it as an extratropical storm, but then the jet stream is going to leave it, and it's just going to kind of wander. This is the Hurricane Center's official forecast. Only expected to be a tropical storm for a few more hours. They may discontinue this as early as 5 p.m., if not tonight at 11 p.m., but I would not expect this to last tomorrow, and instead will become an extra tropical storm. While it will not be super close to Newfoundland or Nova Scotia, especially Newfoundland can expect a pretty good shot from the storm, as it will be a broad storm at the time it gets to this point. The cone doesn't really do it justice as far as the size of the storm. The jet stream is really going to pump a lot of energy into the storm, and it'll become a pretty strong extratropical storm as it kind of stalls off the coast for the next couple of days. Some heavy rain and strong winds are expected, especially in the southern portion of that region. But no impact to the eastern U.S. besides some swells, rip currents, things like that. Nothing much else to talk about with Odette. So we'll move on to some other interests. So we'll go to Invest 95L. Again, Hurricane Center this afternoon up to a 90% chance of development. And earlier today, we had an eddy scat pass move over the storm. This is satellite derived winds. And looking at a much healthier storm, still not quite a closed circulation. You can see the winds coming in here, and then they kind of make this little sharp trough axis, and this is kind of the axis the storm's riding on. But we're not quite to a closed low, although it's very close. We're just waiting on this backside to kind of close off, and that's going to happen sooner than later. Satellite imagery kind of supports that thought that we do have something begin to really wrap up here, and a low is why forming on the central to south end of all this convection. It almost looks like it's beginning to close off. It's very close, but you can see one of the early signs of demise coming is the upper level clouds here moving off to the north, and this is indicating that that wind shear is beginning to impact the storm as an upper trough here, and doesn't show up on visible satellite imagery, but when I switch over to water vapor, it's pretty evident. You can see the strong trough here over the Northern Antilles in the Western Atlantic is beginning to shear the storm. This is well forecast several days out with the GFS, and our system is going to have to kind of wander up under this trough since a low-level steering flow is pushing the majority of the storms and whatnot off to the west northwest, while in the upper levels you're going to have the trough digging down, or in the upper levels, you're the trough digging down and beginning to shear the storm. So it'll definitely be an issue for the system. And usually this means wind shear causes the storm to kind of fall apart or stay weak. Every now and then, though, these upper level troughs with weak storms can sometimes help them out a little bit. It's this weird thing where if the storm is developed and it hits a trough like this, it usually destroys it or significantly weakens it. But sometimes really weak storms can kind of get up under there and actually use the trough to their advantage. So we'll see how that plays out. But again, this system pretty close to developing, and I would say at 5 p.m. this maybe not at 5 p.m., but if not 5, then definitely 11 This will be upgraded to a tropical depression. Probably not a tropical storm, as the ASCAT winds don't really support it, only 30 knots, but definitely a tropical depression, likely sooner than later. Future of the storm remains somewhat uncertain, but I think the confidence that a turn out to sea remains pretty high. We were expecting Odette actually to be the lure for the storm, but that's actually changed a little bit. GFS, though, and Euro both show the system kind of grazing the Northern Antilles and the U.S. British Virgin Islands, maybe even Puerto Rico and Hispaniola on the GFS as it takes a more southerly dive and then begins to turn like this afterwards, where the European model takes a low level center and kind of pulls a little bit further north. So the GFS kind of goes like this, where the European kind of goes like this. So the actual trajectory of the storm depends really on how strong it is. The weaker it is, the more west it wants to kind of drift. But the idea being the same is it'll wind up somewhere north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola by the middle of this week. Well, by the middle of this week, we're going to have a cold front leaving the southern U.S. and what we'll see here as we go back to the weekend, we see the storm moving up by the Antilles, and then high pressure kind of keeps it pushed down for the next couple of days. But you can see this large cold front coming across the eastern U.S. This slides across into the middle of the week, and this begins to turn our storm, which is on the map is somewhere right here. Turn it backwards and push it back out to sea. This is common late September. You get your first big fall cold fronts move through, and then the storms get pushed out, and then it's gone and out of our hair. So good news there that we will see this thing move out. And it does look like that even if Odette doesn't convince it to come out to sea, but this cold front definitely will. And I just don't see a lot of ways this really gets towards us. GFS and Euro ensembles, as far as 95L go, have very high confidence and agreement that it will turn. There's really no ensembles showing it coming any further west. Um, I would imagine if it dove really far west, it stayed really weak. Maybe it could come across into the Western Caribbean or something, but I just don't think that's super likely given that it's already developing. And we'll probably see this thing just move out to sea and not be a problem for us. Our last system to talk about is Invest 97L. This one's coming together pretty fast and could very well become a tropical depression at 5 p.m. I think you'll see this become TD16 and probably the one we just talked about become TD17. Peter and Rose are the next two names. So we are officially past what would be an average complete season, and now we're going into that, hyperactive sort of territory. Already been there, but definitely continuing that pace. But at this point last year, we were already in the Greek alphabet for 2020, so we're not quite on that kind of pace, but it is still a pretty significant pace for a normal hurricane season. 97 out here, come a couple spiral bands coming out of what the center is right here. Earlier, ASCAT pass actually caught this pretty well and did show a closed low level center. Not very strong winds yet, just about 15 20 knots, but a couple 25 30 knots are starting to pop up. We're starting to pop up earlier, so could very well see some winds increase as thunderstorms increase throughout the day, and thunderstorm activity has been fairly persistent around this core and continuing to pop up new storms. So it's still kind of a little bit stuck down in the monsoon trough, but as soon as it gets out of there, this should develop, and I would say at 5 or 11 p.m. this will also develop, so we'll just see which one does first. And thankfully for this little guy, all expected to turn out to sea with this one, no issue. It looks like it's going to move out and not be an issue. And then we may have one more wave coming out behind that. We'll have to watch. The models do indicate the main development region is going to try to stay active into the end of the month. But right now, the upper level pattern, as we switch to that fall time pattern with more cold fronts across the central Atlantic, looks like there's going to be more opportunities for these storms to come out and turn away. So we may have a couple fish storms to talk about. But for right now, it looks like the eastern U.S. pretty well protected. Nothing else showing up in the next several days across the region here. So we got for you guys then your tropical update. As always, appreciate you watching and have a good one.